This is a MK8 Volkswagen Golf, a car that is now a few years on from its initial release, and as a result of that is becoming pretty prevalent in the used classifieds. Now let's face it, brand new, these things were just too blooming expensive. This particular GTE, as lovely as it is, was around about £40,000, 40 grand for a Golf. However, now that depreciation has taken its toll, they've come down a little bit, these are suddenly a much more attractive proposition. Question remains, however, should you actually go out and buy one? Let's start with the looks, because they just matter on a car like this. Now I think this, the GTE, the GTI and the R deserve some special appreciation for consistently having a restraint to their design. We live in a world where hot hatches in particular are becoming more and more flamboyant. Bigger wheels, bigger arches, bigger wings, more carbon fibre. Whereas the Golf has always been quite a consistent, conservative mainstay. And actually, I quite like the monobrow. So in side profile, it is unmistakably, unapologetically Golf, although that front end seems to be a bit more swoopy than what I remember the Mark 7 being like. Now as a result of that, these seem to be quite bad for picking up stone chips along that leading edge of the bonnet, so make sure it's not the case on the one that you're buying. Now that swoopy front end has been done to increase the aerodynamic efficiency of this Golf and in turn decrease the fuel consumption, and it better be good, because this GTE has a claimed fuel consumption of, wait for it, 246 miles per gallon. We'll see about that. Now, although I really like the way that this car looks, this does bother me. It's not even that they're fake exhausts, it's that they're kind of pretending to not be exhausts at all, but we know what they're getting at. I think engineers and designers just decide that if you've got all this space on the back of the car and you don't require exhausts, don't put something that looks a little bit like exhausts. Do something different. So interior wise, you're either going to love or hate this techno tour de force that you get in the MK8. It's screens and touch buttons everywhere. Now the one thing I will say is here in the UK, we make quite a big deal about not using your mobile phone behind the wheel, for good reason. Although I can't really see how this is much different, because nothing is a physical button. Everything requires you to take your eyes off the road in order to use it and navigate through menus. It's kind of odd. Let me tell you one thing I do really like in here, however, and you probably will too. These leather-lined, bolstered GTE seats. Blue in here and red in the GTI. They really do hold you in place. We'll get into that when we get this out on the road. As for the space in the back, plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom. I'm 6'1" for reference, and I fit pretty good. So what I was now going to show you was a really cool feature that would mean you wouldn't be interacting with all these touch buttons quite as often as you think you may have to, and that is because it's got a really smart system wherein you can say things like, my camera almost fell. Jesus. So the way in which this system works is you don't have to speak to it as explicitly as you think you may have to. So rather than have to say, turn my heated seat on, you could say things like, my bum is cold, or my feet are cold. The car would know who said that, what seat they're in the car, and adjust accordingly. However, I've just found out from the owner that on this £40,000 Golf, it is an additional paid service that you can get from your app on the phone, which means all the hardware's in here for it to work, but you just have to pay to activate it. Come on, these are the kind of things that I mean. One thing that is a big move forward with this infotainment system is you no longer need to use a wire to connect your Apple iPhone to use Apple CarPlay. It works really well also, so you can cast maps and different apps from your phone onto the screen. I can see it being standard in pretty much every car in the future, to be honest. Now, one thing I would say about these screens is whether you love them or hate them, they are pretty top drawer. They're really good quality, really sharp, responsive, and look great. Now, one thing to bear in mind if you're looking to buy a used example of a Golf is make sure that center screen turns on correctly when you get into the car and doesn't go black or reboot during the test drive. This is a little bit of a known issue, and usually it just requires a firmware update, so it's not the end of the world. But again, it's hassle. Mention it to the seller before you hand over your hard-earned.
Next, let's take a moment to consider what engines we can get. So one of the most common you're going to find is the 1.5 turbo petrol. That comes with either 130 or 150 brake horsepower. Now the 2 litre diesel, that has either 115 or 150 brake horsepower if that's more your thing. That's particularly impressive, by the way, because the emissions on those diesel engines are down by around 80% from the old cars. Now, in terms of plug-in hybrid technology, you've got the 1.4 turbo petrol. That, combined with the electric motor, makes 204 brake horsepower in the non-GTE cars, or you can opt for the 3-cylinder 1 litre with either 90 or 110 brake horsepower. You can also get that engine with mild hybrid assist too, by the way, in either a manual or 7-speed DSG. As for engines specific to the slightly hotter Golfs, we've got the 241 brake horsepower 2 litre found in the GTI and the 315 brake horsepower 2 litre found in the Golf R. Now that just leaves us with
this, the GTE powertrain, 242 brake horsepower and an impressive 400 Newton meters of torque. That's 30 more than the GTI, but, and this is an absolutely huge but, it's only for around 27 miles, because when that hybrid battery depletes, you're left only with the 148 brake horsepower 1.4 engine. And although it's sufficient for moving this car's 1650 kilo mass around, it certainly loses a bit of the sporty feel. A part-time GTI, if you will. One thing I'm really glad to see on this GTE is it's came as standard with Bridgestone tyres fitted. It wouldn't be my personal choice, still I'd rather have Michelin Pilot Sports on there, but these are doing not too badly. I did see in some of the initial reviews, I don't know if they maybe revised it after 2021, that seems to be the last review that I've watched on YouTube, but they were sending these things and the GTIs out with Hankook tyres on them. And again, it's a bit like that paid service where you need to pay to use the voice recognition. I just feel like, come on Volkswagen, for 40 grand, you can fit a set of premium tyres on the car, surely. The overall driving experience is just really rather pleasant. It certainly doesn't egg you on like a Civic Type R or something like that would. It's not frantic in the way that an Uber hatch RS3 or A45 AMG is. Not that I'd expect it to be, that's maybe the R's job, to be a little bit more aligned with that type of car. But overall, just really, really pleasant. But if that's something that you're looking for, if you're looking for something a little bit more sedate, a little bit more on the comfort side of the scale, this could be a good match. There's an overall harmonious feel to the way this thing drives, and I put that down to the steering feel and weighting, matching that of the pedal feel and weighting, which in turn matches the overall mass and feel of this car. Yeah, just a real harmonious feeling to the way that it is. So let's talk real driving stuff for a minute, because if you're going to go out and pay a heck of a lot of money for a GTI, GTE, or even an R, chances are you're going to want to properly enjoy it on some back roads like we've got here. So chassis-wise, superbly compliant, and honestly, if you're finding the limits of this and finding it coming undone on the road, you're a nutter, and you just need to go to the track, basically, because things are superbly compliant. Suspension-wise, it is a firmer spring rate than I expected. You could probably see that in the camera a little bit. This car's on a fixed shock absorber, the adaptive ones are a pricey option. Spring rate is a little firmer than I expected. Not necessarily a bad thing, just gives the car a slightly more sporty feel, which contradicts slightly what I was saying about it being a more relaxed drive. It's not to the point of something like a Mark II Focus RS. It's still comfortable, but it does prop up nicely in the bends as well. Now, dampers, this is where this car really shines in my opinion, and quite honestly it shows how far damping technology has come on in recent years, because even mid-corner bumps when you're starting to make pace are just shrugged off, dealt with, and you're free to get on with minimal upset to the car. This particular car has got the adaptive cruise control fitted. Now, it's got lane assist, so effectively you can take your hands off the wheel in theory and it'll start to turn the corners for you to an extent. However, I've heard a rumour that you need to keep both hands on the steering wheel. You can't just have one hand on it. We're going to test that theory now. Let's see. We are turning. That's not my force turning the car. It's going well so far. Don't take over steering, what? Oh, fuck. Okay, yeah, you need to keep both hands on. We reached the grand old distance of 27.4 miles. My hybrid battery has depleted. What a sad moment. But I'm glad it has, because it's brought me to a point, my main contention with this car, I would go as far to say, and that is that 1.4 engine alone is simply not enough to allow all the things that I've really enjoyed about this car to shine through. So that communicative steering feel, that nice pedal weighting, the good brakes, the nice chassis, none of it can really be fully exploited with just that engine alone. You need that added oomph, that 100 brake horsepower or so that battery provides. Now, I know what you're going to say to this: ditch the GTE and go off and buy the GTI then, but here is the matter of fact. Throughout this test drive, we've averaged 87.3 miles per gallon, and that is just simply not going to happen in the GTI. So if you really favour stratospheric economy and you live 30 miles or so away from work, well, maybe 15 miles so you can get the return trip, this thing's going to be awesome. This part-time GTI is going to give you that mega economy and some of the performance to boot. Something to think about. So how do we start to summarise our MK8 Golf experience? Well, let's start with the looks. Big tick there from me, even if it does have fake exhausts that actually are pretending to not be exhausts at all. Weird situation going on there. Comfort, tick. Space, tick. Practicality, tick. Overall size, tick. Driving experience, tick. So long as you don't want something too lady, there are better hot hatches out there for the money than this if it's a lady drive that you're after. But if you are looking for something a little bit more sedate, as we explained, this is a great option. You're starting to get the idea here. It ticks a heck of a lot of boxes, and that is what the Golf has always been good at. In my opinion, the MK8 is no exception. However, I still maintain what I began this video by saying, and that is, it is not worth the original £40,000. £40,000, it still stings to say. It's not worth that money. However, I was having a look just this morning, and you can pick up a lightly used, even GTE, for high 20s, and that makes a heck of a lot more sense. Now, thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you on the next one.